Aunty Grace was not like other women. She looked young, flawless skin, full lips, and a body that turned heads. At first glance, people assumed she was in her early 30s. Some even thought she was younger. But if you looked closely, if you stared long enough into her dark eyes, you will see it, the truth. Aunty Grace was 65 years old. She had lived far beyond the age her beauty suggested, and she had a secret. Many years ago, in a quiet village deep in the heart of Nigeria, Aunty Grace had been banished. The elders had discovered her wickedness, how she used young children for her strange forbidden ritual. She had drained them, taken from them, stolen the essence of their youth to keep herself young. And when the spirits of the land finally rebelled against her, misfortune struck. Crops withered. Pregnant women lost their babies. The sick never recovered. The entire village knew it was her doing. So one cold night, they gathered with fire and rage, dragging her from her hut. "Leave before we bury you alive." Aunty Grace ran. She ran as fast as her aging legs could carry her, escaping into the thick forest. But Aunty Grace did not die. She did not wither. She did not even age. So she found her way to Lagos, the city of endless opportunity, where no one asks questions, where secrets could hide in plain sight. And she started again. At first it was small, a few drops of blood from a crying child at the market, a single hair plucked from an unsuspecting infant head. Then she got greedy. She needed more. She needed a constant supply. So she became a nanny, a perfect disguise, a gentle, caring woman who loved children, the kind parents trusted. The daycare was perfect, too perfect. Little Angels Daycare was a sanctuary for working parents. The staffs were warm, the environment was safe, and the children were always well taken care of. Parents swore by the place, praising the nannies, especially Aunty Grace. Aunty Grace was every parent's favorite. She was gentle, patient, and always had a kind smile. No one ever questioned her method. No one ever suspected a thing. But behind her soft-spoken nature was a darkness no one could see. At night, when all the babies had gone home, Aunty Grace would lock herself in a small storage room, there in the dim light of a single flickering bulb, and collect a small bottle. As soon as she got home, she performed her ritual. In a small black clay pot, she poured some content of the bottle, mixed and scooped a thick reddish-brown mixture. She smeared it on her face. The little left, she drinks it. Within seconds, her skin transformed, becoming smoother, brighter, glowing with an unnatural radiance. But the price for her beauty wasn't bought with money. It was the blood of innocent babies. She never took too much at once, just a few drops here and there. A small scratch during diaper changes, a tiny prick when no one was looking. The babies cried, but no one suspected a thing. Even when their parents were around, they assumed it was dizziness, hunger, or maybe winning troubles. But the more she took, the weaker the babies became. Their cheeks lost their fullness. Their tiny hands seemed thinner. Some parents noticed, but brushed it off as a phase of growth and development. Until one day, Mama Agnes, a grandmother of one of the babies in the daycare, came visiting. Mama Agnes arrived at her daughter's house on a Tuesday evening. She was visiting from the village, eager to spend time with her granddaughter, little Chichi. But the moment she laid her eyes on Chichi, her heart skipped a beat. The child was pale. Her once round cheeks had sunk in. Her eyes, though bright, looked tired, too tired for a 1-year-old. Mama Agnes frowned. This child is not well. Why is she looking so sick? She asked. Her daughter Ada laughed it off. Mama, don't worry. Chichi is just being stubborn. She doesn't like real food, only juice and biscuits. Mama Agnes didn't smile. Something didn't feel right. That night, while Ada and her husband slept in their room, leaving Mama and baby Chichi, she sat beside the baby's crib, watching her breathe. A strange chill filled the room. Chichi whimpered in her sleep, turning restlessly. The old woman muttered a silent prayer. By morning, she had made up her mind that there was something disturbing Chichi. But she didn't want to tell Ada or her husband. She didn't want to create fear in them. I want Chichi to stay home with me today, Mama Agnes announced at breakfast. Ada hesitated. But Mama, I have work. She can't stay with me. Don't worry. She will stay with me, the old woman said firmly. There was something in her voice that left no room for argument. After her daughter and son-in-law left, Mama Agnes wrapped the baby in a thick shawl on her back and took a long winding road to the outskirts of town. Her destination, the house of Iya Ologe, the powerful herbalist who was also her friend. Inside, an old woman sat by a clay pot, her wrinkled hands grinding a mixture of roots and bones. She looked up as Mama Agnes entered. Mama Agnes, what brings you to my home today? Nice to see you. Her eyes sharp, narrowing at the baby. The moment Iya Ologe saw Chichi, she dropped her pistol. Who is doing this to this child? Mama Ologe hissed. Her voice was thick with anger. Mama Agnes' heart pounded. Doing what? The woman walked over, tracing her fingers lightly over the baby's tiny arms. Someone is taking from her, draining her little by little. The old woman turned sharply to Mama Agnes. My friend, if this continues, this child won't survive. A cold fear settled in Mama Agnes' chest. Who is collecting from her? Mama Ologe didn't answer. Instead, she reached into a calabash and brought out a small pouch filled with fine golden powder and handed it to Mama Agnes. Rub this on her face every night and morning, she instructed, and watch closely. The next day, Chichi's mother prepared her for daycare as usual. But this time, Mama Agnes insisted on accompanying them to drop her off. At the entrance of Little Angels Daycare, the other nannies greeted them cheerfully. But when Aunty Grace saw Chichi, she froze. Something about the baby felt off. A strange heat crawled over Aunty Grace's skin, pricking like tiny needles. She held her fist, forcing a smile. Chichi looks different today, Aunty Grace said carefully, speaking to Chichi's mother. Mama Agnes didn't miss the way the woman's eye twitched. She's fine, Mama Agnes said, watching Aunty Grace's reaction. For the first time, Aunty Grace felt something she had never felt before. Fear. She turned away quickly, trying to shake the unease settling in her stomach. But what she didn't know was that Mama Agnes was watching her every move because of how she froze as soon as she saw Chichi. Mama Agnes refused to leave immediately. She sat at the daycare's wooden bench, her sharp eyes following Aunty Grace's every movement. She watched as the nanny forced a smile, pretending to be unbothered. But something was wrong. Aunty Grace kept glancing at Chichi, quick and giving uneasy looks before turning away, as if she couldn't bear to stare for too long. The powder was working obviously. Mama Agnes tightened her wrapper around her waist and left. Mama Agnes went straight to the house of Iyologe to tell her observations that morning. Iyologe said, "That woman's life is sustained by the babies at the daycare. Continue applying the substance to make your granddaughter untouchable." That evening, when Ada and Mama Agnes picked up Chichi, she noticed something strange. For the first time in weeks, her baby wasn't fuzzy. She didn't whimper in exhaustion or stretch out her tiny hands begging to be carried. Instead, she sat calmly in her mother's arms, watching everything with wide knowing eyes. Aunty Grace barely spoke. She simply handed over the baby bags and said, "See you tomorrow." As Ada and Mama Agnes walked home, Mama Agnes finally spoke. "You must not take this child back there," she said firmly. Ada frowned. "Mama, what are you saying? I have work, and this daycare is the best in our area." Mama Agnes stopped working. "Something evil is in that daycare, Ada. And that nanny," she shook her head. "She is afraid of Chichi now." Ada swallowed hard. "Afraid? How?" Mama Agnes turned to face her daughter fully. When a wicked person sees what can destroy them, they fear. Ada was so scared about what her mother was saying. That night, when everyone slept, Aunty Grace tossed and turned in her bed. A sharp pain crawled at her chest, making her gasp for air. Sweat poured on her forehead. Her body trembled as if an invincible hand was pulling at her skin. Then she heard it. A baby laughter. It was low at first, then it became louder. It was coming from her mirror. Slowly, she turned her head and she froze. Aunty Grace screamed. She shot up from bed, panting heavily. The room was empty. The mirror was normal. Obviously, it was a dream. Aunty Grace barely slept that night. The nightmare kept replaying in her mind. Her skin felt dry. Her glow was fading. She rushed to the mirror again, running her fingers over her face. The smooth, youthful shine that made people admire her beauty was vanishing. Tiny wrinkles appeared where they had never been before. Her heart pounded. This had never happened before. She went to her small black pot to apply more mixture on her face, but the mixture was dried up. She was confused. It never happened before. It's always fresh every day. She froze in fear and confusion. But Aunty Grace needed more. She needed more blood, more life, and she knew exactly where to get it. In the morning, Aunty Grace got to Little Angels Daycare earlier than usual. She barely greeted the other nannies, heading straight to the baby session. The tiny cribs lined the room, each one holding a sleeping child. The sight of them made Aunty Grace's mouth dry with anticipation. Just a few drops, just enough to bring back the glow before it gets worse and someone notices. She reached out to lift one of the babies. She held a small syringe in her hand. She didn't even check which child it was or if anyone was watching. She just needed a little, just a few drops, just enough to make the dryness disappear. The baby whimpered softly as she lifted him up, her fingers already searching for the tiny legs. She drew a good amount, enough to sustain her. Then, the door swung open. A loud gasp echoed through the room. Aunty Grace's body went stiff. She turned slowly, her hands still gripping the baby and holding the syringe filled with blood, only to see a woman standing at the entrance. It was the child's mother. Her face was frozen in shock, her eyes dating between Aunty Grace and her baby. The woman had been called earlier that morning, about her child's declining health. She had rushed down immediately, worried sick. But now, standing there, she was seeing something she wasn't understanding. Aunty Grace was holding her baby in a way that didn't feel normal, and the syringe in her hand. The woman's breath hitched. "What are you doing?" Her voice shook. Aunty Grace's mind raced. She was caught. Aunty Grace's heart pounded violently. Her hands trembled as she quickly forced a smile, adjusting the baby in her arms like she had simply been rocking her to sleep. "Oh, Mama Tobe," she said, forcing a nervous smile. "Your baby was crying a little. I wanted to check if she had a fever." Mama Tobe's eyes darkened. "As what? A doctor or a nurse? And the blood in the syringe came from where?" Her motherly instinct screamed at her. Aunty Grace stepped back slightly. Her face tensed. She couldn't provide an answer. Mama Tobe moved closer and collected her baby. But then the baby let out a weak, tired whimper. Her baby felt too light. Mama Tobe's hand shook as she touched her baby's tiny legs. The skin was cold. The vein and the spot the blood was collected was too visible. "This wasn't just fever," Mama Tobe shouted. "You better start talking. What have you done to my child?" The entire room fell silent. Aunty Grace swallowed hard. "Nothing, I swear." But Mama Tobe wasn't convinced. "So this is what you people do here?" Something evil has been happening in this daycare. And it has been happening for a long time. Mama Tobe didn't think. She screamed. The sound sent chills over everyone's spines. Parents in the waiting area and the proprietor rushed in. Other nannies turned in confusion. "What happened? What's wrong? Why are you shouting like this, madam?" Mama Tobe's voice cracked as she held her baby tightly. "My child. She had been feeling sick for days. I felt it was teething. I dropped her off this morning. Few hours ago, I was called in that I should come pick her up. She had high temperature. I just came in and caught this nanny holding her with a syringe filled with blood. And the size the blood was collected is really visible on my baby's skin." "You collected blood from a sick child? For what exactly?" Everyone was shocked. And everyone saw Aunty Grace's face. The sweat, the panic, the way she was slowly stepping backward, as if she was looking for a way to escape. Then, a voice from the crowd said, "Check the CCTV." Aunty Grace's entire body stiffened. No. The CCTV. Her mouth went dry. She had been always careful, always made sure to do it in blind spots. But her desperation today made her not to even think of safety. The manager of the daycare, a stout woman with sharp eyes, didn't hesitate. She stormed to the office. Few minutes later, she returned. Her face was pale. Her eyes was filled with horror. She didn't say a word. She simply raised the tablet in her hand and pressed play. The video was shaking at first, then it cleared. On the screen, Aunty Grace appeared, sitting beside a crib. The footage showed her gently picking up a sleeping baby. And then, she brought out a small needle. Gasp echoed in the room. Some mothers covered their mouth. Others clutched their babies tighter. Aunty Grace pricked the baby's tiny foot. A few drops of blood came out. She collected it in a small bottle. Then, horrifyingly, she rubbed it on her face. There was scream, shout, and curses. Mothers lunged forward, their voices filled with rage. This witch has been using our baby's blood for rituals. She had been draining them. I'm sure that's why our babies are always weak and sick, one mother said. God punish you, Grace. "You will die today," another one shouted. Aunty Grace stumbled back. Her whole body was shaking. She had been caught, and there was no escape. The crowd surged towards her. Fingers grabbed her dress. Someone slapped her across the face. Another yanked her hair. She screamed. They dragged her outside. She barely made it past the daycare gate before the first stone hit her back. And then another, and another. Then many other stones followed. There was blood, pain, and finally darkness. The angry parents and passerby stoned Aunty Grace to death. 2 weeks later, Little Angels Daycare shut down permanently. Investigations revealed that Aunty Grace has been doing this for years. No one knew the reason why she did it, or where she had learned such a dark practice. But one thing was clear: the babies had suffered. The glow she had stolen from them had now led her to her grave. And for Mama Agnes, she was happy that Grace had been caught and her granddaughter survived her evil ritual. She simply looked at Chichi one day and smiled and whispered, "The spirits fight for the innocent." The moral lesson of this story is that parents should always do a background check before enrolling their children in any daycare. Also, not all cry from a baby should be overlooked. Parents, pay attention to every detail of your child. Check them out every day. And most importantly, let's be prayerful.